So let me introduce myself. My name is Delmar Larson. I'm a professor of chemistry at the University of California, Davis. I'm the founder and director of the LibreTexts project, and I will be your guide for this OctoberFest, both today and tomorrow, the entire guide. And this is in contrast to our summer LibreFest meetings, which is a 4-day-ish extravaganza with various people coming in order to present different things at different times. So with that, just want to mention a few things. This is a 2-day sort of no frills-ish overview of the LibreVerse and how to actually do things on the LibreVerse. The only sort of fluff will be the introduction, which is the presentation I'm going to be giving here in order to just give you a general idea about the overview of the LibreVerse, the LibreText philosophy, how we do things. And I'm going to try to cut that down a little bit. My presentation is an hour presentation, but I have a feeling I'd like to be able to make that short so we can actually get into the nitty-gritty details of doing things, which is the point of this abridged OctoberFest. The intent is that the first day, which is today, we'll be focusing on overview. We'll be focusing on the comments conductor system, which you had some familiarity with because you used it in order to register for this workshop, and then dealing with remixing, which is one of the issues or one of the features that we focused a lot on development over the last 5 to 6 plus years. And then if we have time, we'll start a little bit of editing of pages on the content, not just remixing of pages at the page level. But we're probably not going to get into it in a lot of detail, and we'll continue that process tomorrow morning or afternoon, depending on what your time zone is, and then transition into adapt and such. And that's going to be the bulk of the LibreVerse, although there are other features that are connected to that. I like to keep things somewhat informal, so if you have questions, feel free to throw them into the chat. Jennifer will be able to monitor them during the period of time that she's going to be here. And if it looks like that we didn't catch your question or your question is important in order to address in context, then please just throw it out and we can discuss it right there. Because again, like in our classes, if someone has a question, invariably someone else may have the similar question, so it's useful in order to address it. So let's get things started. Actually, I should ask, does anyone have any questions before we get things started? So no one has chimed in, and those that I can see didn't say much. So let's get things going here. So in order to talk a bit about, well, to be your guide for the next couple of days, it's important for you to have some idea about who I am. So like I mentioned before, I'm a professor of chemistry at the University of California, Davis. I've been here since 2005. My research focus has been on ultrafast laser spectroscopies of photoactive biological systems. The Nobel Prize in Physics a few weeks ago went to attosecond pulses, which is 10 to the minus 18 seconds, very short pulses, so short that nuclei don't move. I'm a little bit slower than that in the femtosecond range, but it's still pretty fast. But that's not what we're here about. You're here in order to talk about or for us to discuss the LibreTexts project, which I am the founder of back in 2008. It was then called the ChemWiki, and it was an open pedagogy project where I was using students in order to construct the textbook for my general chemistry class, because there was no alternative or free version that I could rely on in order to take the place of relatively costly textbooks. That's evolved into the greater LibreTexts project, which has much greater facet, much better impact than what we had before, and hopefully that'll be clear at the end of this workshop. I'm the founder of the UC Davis Aggie Open, which is the campus OER program. I'm an adopter of OER, I'm an adapter of OER, I'm a creator of OER, and I'm a curator of OER. And this doesn't just apply to me, but it applies to almost everybody on our development team. So we're practitioners, and we have a very practitioner-oriented perspective around OER. In other words, what do faculty need in order to be able to utilize and more specifically capitalize on the benefits of OER in the classroom? And that guides almost everything that we do and all our perspectives and feedback when people ask these sort of questions. There are other valid approaches for OER, like the librarian-based approach or a vendor-based approach or a publisher-based approach, but we have a very practitioner-oriented approach. I have not used a commercial textbook in any of my classes since 2014. And I see no reason for me to break that trend. Uh, and I'm very happy with what we've done, both in developing the LibreTexts and migrating away from commercial solutions. Okay, so as an instructor, became clear to me several years after I got to UC Davis that I was a critical component of an existing commercial system that was making textbooks unaffordable for students. Basically, the publishers were making high prices and they were relying on me in order to force my students in order to purchase those books. And I felt that that was a chain that I could break. I didn't have to participate in this. It was not entirely easy in order to separate it out, which is one of the reasons why OER has not been extensively adopted, although it was growing quite rapidly. But a key point is that I felt that we needed to be able to do a change, and a guiding core value behind both my activities and the LibreText project and all the people off of that is the belief that students are not a market to exploit or to make a profit off of. And that applies to multiple levels out there. I understand that there are needs for sustainability. So I'm not draconian in that sense, but you don't need to monetize and abuse students. And you don't need to abuse faculty or campuses that are trying to pursue educational missions. And there are a lot of people who are doing that, both from commercial publishers and even within the OER community. But we can discuss that at a later date. So that's our goal. What is our mission? Well, the LibreText mission, we have a mission statement that I have not looked at for years. This is the statement that I like to give out when I give my presentations, in that we're implementing a community-built platform for the construction, curation, adoption, and adaption, all four of those are critical, of OER that is comprehensive and can be curated at multiple levels. So each of these three words, community, comprehensive, and curation, are particularly important to define how we operate. Again, they're focused with the practitioner perspective at hand. Each of these words in the parentheses here are particularly important in terms of practical applications of what we pursue. So we believe that it's important in order to address these at various aspects of our in the academic community. So anyways, community is a key component. That means you. It means anyone who wants to contribute to it. This is not a one-size-fits-all approach where we make a book and you either accept it or you don't. That would be something akin to, for example, OpenStax. It's open educational resources that we are particularly interested in. So that can be defined in a variety of different ways and can take a long time. I don't want to do that. For the sake of this conversation, I want to say free, more specifically, freely available for students in order to access and freely available for faculty to customize. And I'm going to leave that at the for this conversation. Comprehensive means that we have an interest in order to follow a no gap left behind policy around academia. Well, we were born out of chemistry, and chemistry is one of the most mature of our libraries. We have a great interest in order to address anything in academia that has an interest in order to advance the students, because our concern, our people, is the benefit of the students, and that is the only criterion that actually dictates our success. Various aspects of that for the students, but still the students that we care mostly about. We also follow a no tech left behind policy, which means that we are centralizing technologies, open source technologies specifically, such that it can enable OER's distribution, construction, and essentially get into the classroom and having that benefit that I mentioned for students. And lastly, the content that we have has to be curated. So we don't want a static infrastructure. Stuff that can't be curated, that can't be updated, can't be customized. For example, a pile of PDFs will be an example of a non-curated repository of content. We want to be able to update that, and that requires a bit of technologies in order to advance that. So this is something that I've mentioned in the past. I just want to mention it very briefly here. The key aspect that we have in terms of making OER and promoting OER is that it has a critical step in order to address equity gaps. One of the primary benefit of OER is that students that have economic equity gaps are oftentimes correlated with other properties like gender and ethnic issues that ultimately propagates an inequality that extends not just from college, but beyond. So we can use this as a critical mechanism in order to help address that, and that is a driving force behind how we and why we do what we do. So that frees up funds for students that are better spent, allows for OER also allows for customization of resources, whether they're textbooks, homework, etc., to address students and class identities. And this is particularly important in order to facilitate greater learning, which is ultimately what we want our resources in order to do, whether they're OER or they're for profit. If we're able to customize the content in order to target for the identities, or humanizing the content in order to engage those identities of the students that are out there, whether they happen to be cultural or location or gender, or even gender, or even sexuality and other things. Those are benefit education and learning, and that's a key component behind what we're able to do. So now, that's the preamble. We'll get that out of the way here. Now let's introduce some of the things that are a little bit more confusing to people. We are Libra happy. We put the word Libra behind way too many things out there, and that can be very confusing to people. So I want to be able to provide a few definitions before we get started here. So LibreText is the brand name that we use for the entire effort. It also is used for the project, the team, the company. We're both on UC Davis's campus and a not-for-profit entity off campus in order to be able to do things that campuses don't allow us to be able to operate effectively at. And that's, well, that's who we are. The LibreVerse is the practical manifestation of our effort. And that's essentially an interconnected ecosystem of technologies that promotes OER for the students. The LibreVerse has a range of different technologies that are part of it. Those technologies are oftentimes well suited for a specific niche, because we don't believe in pushing one technology far beyond its scope, because invariably that generates a fragile system that's out there. You may hear me mention the LibreNet, but I'm probably not going to be discussing it too much. The LibreNet is our consortium. It's our sustainability model. So we operate at cost. We work very hard to try to operate at cost for a variety of reasons. And the primary reason is our philosophy is that we don't want to make a profit off of what we're doing. So the LibreNet is meant in order to operate as a sustainability for our infrastructure, where campuses can join in order to be able to help support the infrastructure and also have some additional benefits that you don't get if you're not part of the LibreNet. And I can mention that as a later date, or Jennifer can mention at a later date if it's applicable and you guys are interested in it. Then comes the confusing part, in that we have Libre behind a handful of things. Most of those can be ignored. At least the Libre part can be ignored. For example, we sometimes talk about it in our Commons and Conductor. We'll call it Libre Commons. We've dropped that, but sometimes you'll see it here and there. Sometimes in front of the studio, we'll call it Libre Studio, which is not entirely again used, and a handful of other ones that are out there. At one point, our analytics, I wanted to call it LibreLytics, and that's when the rest of my team told me that I'm just going a little too crazy. So at that point there, I'm stepping back in order to try to remove Libre from everything. But the key point is that the open aspect that comes with the word Libre is a defining characteristic of how we operate. So what is the LibreVerse? Well, the LibreVerse can be viewed in a variety of different ways. From a functionality perspective, you can view it as a construction platform for OER. And that's not just for textbooks, that's for homework, for some ancillary materials. It can be also viewed as a dissemination platform. In fact, it's the most popular dissemination platform for textbook OER content on the internet today. The only thing that's bigger from a traffic perspective is Wikipedia. So we deliver somewhere in the order of 900,000 page views a day. And we've delivered an accumulated 1.1 billion with the B pages since we started. And that's just the libraries alone for reviewing it, not downloading it, not printing, and not the homework and lots of other things. So this is more on the back end. From the student perspective, we wanted to build the LibreVerse to be a learning platform. A mechanism in order to not just find content, but to use the content and use it as a mechanism in order to facilitate enhanced learning and enhanced learning analytics that can be an interplay between the instructor and the student that's out there. We're still building many aspects behind that, but we're very excited about where that's going. So this is a topical overview of the LibreVerse. It's a little bit older in that we're trying to consolidate things. The core component of the LibreVerse are our libraries. We have about 18 independently operating libraries, mostly focusing on specific fields that host the textbook content or content that is stored as text, like worksheets, laboratories, and things like that. Ancillary or decorating those libraries, which act as a hub, will be these technologies in order to advance those things. So in other words, we want to be able to build what we refer to as the textbook of the future. The textbook of the future is a textbook that involves technology at some levels. I don't know what it looks like because it's the future, but I have an idea behind what it would look like now. And that includes the ability in order to have homework infrastructure accompany it. For those people who are teaching in data analytics or in computer science or other fields that require manipulating data, access to Jupyter Notebook system, which gives you the ability in order to interact with code or interact with text. We have advanced learning analytics infrastructure. We have a JavaScript server. These are backend that you see only the front end as an instructor or as a student. That also includes our bot server for effective curation of our content because we have 600,000 pages of content. And if you want to curate that page by page, that can be a very long, slow process. So we need to build a set of tools in order to facilitate that. The Commons Conductor system is going to be the first thing that we're going to be discussing after I go through this overview, but it's our portal to the LibreVerse. It operates as a cataloging system and it operates as a project management tool. In fact, it will be the primary interface for building books. We have a set of forums that we had separated. We're merging that into the Commons Conductor in order to use the interface that we use that's used for building books as the interface for facilitating communication between instructor and instructor on specific fields or between campus and campus and whatever is necessary for building those communities of practice, because the underlying aspect of OER is sharing is caring. When someone creates something, let someone else benefit from it. And more importantly, making them benefit from it in a coherent manner instead of a fragmented infrastructure, which some of our other OER projects in the community will foster. Okay, so let's talk about the libraries. So in order to talk about the libraries and why we actually do things in the way that we go about doing it, it's important in order to emphasize what the current state is, or at least the state, well, it's still the current state, but this is how it was when we actually started branding it in this way many years ago. So I believe the OER universe is fragmented. When I say fragmented, I mean that you find OER in a variety of different places. You can find OER in the textbook library. Actually, you don't find it there. You find a link to it. It's a referatory. It's not really a library, or it's more of a library guide. OER Commons is mostly a library guide, but they have some content. OpenStax hosts content, but only their content. Merlot has been around for a long time, hosts content, hosts a little bit of content, mostly known for its referatory capabilities. OpenSunny, Galileo, Oregon, NOVA, BC Campus, eCampus Ontario, Alberta, Hawaii, Saylor, California State University System, Oregon State University, and numerous other places. In fact, I would even make an argument that many computers on many campuses host, more specifically faculty's computers, host content that would be OER if you're able to pull it out, tease it, and distribute it. That's basically what MIT's OpenCourseWare did close to 20 years ago, over 20 years ago, in fact. So the key point here is that finding OER can be a particularly nasty endeavor. There are oftentimes people who are well skilled in order to be able to find that stuff. I call them oracles, and they're oftentimes librarians. And it's gotten a lot worse now that things are distributed all over. They're also distributed in a variety of different formats, and there are lots of negative issues associated with having a fragmented infrastructure than just being able to find the content. Our approach is to believe that we don't want a fragmented infrastructure. We want to bring OER into a centralized infrastructure so you can effectively find it, you can effectively remix it, and you can effectively use it in order to address what you want to do in the laboratory instead of having it everywhere and being able to do it. So what we do is we capitalize on the O and OER, more specifically the open license in OER, and we harvest, which is our term of bringing the content into a central infrastructure. And those are our libraries, predominantly our libraries, although the other technologies host external or secondary content that we've harvested, that is. So one way in order to view what we're doing is we're building a big bucket of Legos. So you know where the bucket is, you know it's all standardized, so you don't have things like OER and PDFs that you have to copy and paste. And anyone who's copied and pasted from a PDF knows that you have to go through a lot of pain in order to be able to get that content into something useful. We do that to begin with so that faculty don't need to do that. Why? Because you need faculty to have as low of a barrier as possible in order to be able to do what we need to do so that we actually maintain staying in OER, adopting OER and then staying in OER. So we're building this bigger box of Legos of OER. It centralizes the content, it standardizes the content, it makes it easily interconvertible. You can then build collections, aka books. You can then, this provides maximum flexibility because once this box gets big enough, then you're only limited by your imagination. And it's curatable. So you can come in and update something and everyone can benefit from it instead of having things fragmented. And it makes it difficult because you have to have a lot of versioning infrastructure. And that doesn't really exist out there in almost all but one projects that still isn't even live or actively live. So we have this massive repository of content, 600,000 pages that's out there. We need to find an effective way in order to be able to use it. Now, when I mean use it, I mean it from the context of being able to remix from it, capitalize on the O and the OER stuff, and have an instructor come in and pick and choose the content and the pages they want in order to build a customized version of the book. In order to facilitate that, we introduced the OER Remixer about 5 years ago. Last year, I got an award for OpenEd Global, and it's a drag and drop tool that we're going to be focusing a bit about in an hour and a half. That lets us be able to go through the 600,000 pages on the left side and just drag and drop and make a book. There's a few additional features that come from that, but the key point is to make it super easy in order to remix so that you can spend the time focusing on updating and curating the content in the pages rather than having to worry about organizing and structuring these things. The libraries are designed in such a way in order to provide the benefits of a centralization and the benefits of decentralization. It sounds kind of weird off of that, but the key point is that we have content on our libraries typically generated into three broad categories, either our campus bookshelves, our central bookshelves, or learning objects. So both of these host books, collections of things. Learning objects typically doesn't hold collections. They will hold super organization. Like, for example, laboratories in chemistry is found here, which is typically a much bigger repository than what you find in a textbook form, or learning, various other types of learning objects, visualizations, simulations, things like that, things that you can actually pick and choose and put into your textbooks as independent components off of it. The central bookshelves are the books that we curate, the LibreTexts project curates, or other people, other partners will curate that we centralize. The intent of that is that most, if not all, the content here is meant to be unique. So you can cut through and find book after book and know that the content is relatively unique or exclusively unique in each book. So you don't have to get gummed up looking at 7 to 10 different copies of the same sort of book that's just named differently. And anyone who's gone through the OER landscape and tried to find something, it should be familiar with that sort of enterprise. The campus bookshelves are bookshelves that are designed for specific campuses that can come in and store their books. And it gives them the opportunity to customize their books to suit their needs. Those books are curated mostly, but not exclusively, by the authors on those campuses or by the campuses themselves. The only exception where we get in is we want to be able to make sure that if we need to address accessibility issues, that we can implement some bots or in order to be able to address them manually. And if there happen to be issues dealing with vulgarity or offensiveness, or even if things are explicitly wrong, we'll step in order to be able to address that. I should be objectively incorrect. Then we come in and fix like that. And that's one of the benefits in order to address how we are, because we're not just a repository. I like to refer to us as a curatatory. We hold the content and we're constantly updating, constantly using the community in order to move the content forward. And we don't believe that the buck stops at publishing. And this, I think, is exceedingly important, not just for a specific campus, but for OER as a whole. And again, it defines part of our practitioner's perspective on things. Being in academia, it's very clear that publishing is not the end game. So I just want to mention a few features of particular interest dealing with the libraries, especially the ones that separate us from other projects. One is that we have an auto attribution feature, and you'll see more about this tomorrow. Auto attribution feature, if fully set up, and it's mostly set up on most pages, but that it needs to be processed everywhere. It lets you copy and paste text from one page and put it onto another page, and it automatically brings the attribution over. So anyone who's dealt with licensing issues in OER is familiar with the pain associated with making sure attributions are put in place. The intent off of here is that when you copy content, it essentially will put down below where the content is. And then if we actually toggle a switch, it will highlight the color of that content that's associated with a different with a source. So you can mix things from different sources. You press the button, you can find out where those pages come from. And that provides convenient mechanism in order to ensure compliance with the legality, let me phrase it, compliance with the licensing of the OER, which is an exceedingly important issue associated with OER. And we're very happy with this technology because it's made things much, much easier to remix and keep track of where things are, how content's distributed. So if you create something on the platform, you can then find out who else is using it, and then bring it together and give a presentation on the impact of your work. So we have several different views of the libraries. When we look at the library, you're going to see it in our developer mode or non-reader view mode, which is the default right now, but you can always switch to reader view mode. In the upper left-hand corner, there's a button on here, and it gives a more streamlined interface to reading. And again, the intent is an interface that's better or more powerful for students. And it has a handful of other features that we're very excited about. I mentioned dissemination is a key component about what the LibreTexts provides. We can distribute in a variety of different ways. I mentioned these 1.1 billion page views because those are actually first a big number, and the second one that's connected to anyone who has an internet access in order to tap into our content. However, you can distribute content in other ways. For example, you can download PDFs. You can embed the content in learning management systems via common cartridge. That's the easiest way in order to do that. That's going to be expanded soon into other mechanisms. You can get the print files that you can upload and print directly to any print service. We will operate as a middleman in order to do an interface between faculty and students and the printer, in this case here, Lulu Express, where you can actually get a copy of the book at cost or at near cost. We expect the EPUB not this summer, but this winter. And we have been working for a while in order to expand the distribution of our content via Raspberry Pi boxes for offline access. That was developed for developing countries. But it was clear during the pandemic, at least became clear to us, I know other people were already aware of this, that there is a sizable population of students in America and North America that have limited access to high-speed internet, and this may provide a alternative mechanism in order to tap into things. We're currently looking in ways in order to expand this so we can include it with our homework system. So it is a bit more powerful than just basically having our textbooks. These numbers are a little bit old, but we've delivered somewhere in the order of 1.5 to 2 million PDF downloads, somewhere in the order of about 15,000 downloads a day. And we've sold somewhere in the order of 3,000 to 4,000 physical books through our bookstore. Many of those are through campus bookstores that use us sort of as a wholesaler, which we're perfectly fine for doing as long as it reduces the cost for students and they have access to the digital version if they decide that they don't want to pay for the physical version. So for example, this book right here, a GOB book, is about $12 when we purchased it. Black and white, paperback. If you want to get color, it costs $5 more. If you want to get a hardbound, it costs another $5 more and such. Again, that's what the printer costs. We don't get it. We get barely anything on top of that. So that's a general overview of what we're doing. This is the LibreVerse that we have here. Let me just take a quick look at the chat, unless are there any questions outside of adapt? Amelia sent a direct message asking if the recording will be available. The recordings will be available, but they probably won't be available tonight because we have to process this and go through standard video editing, which I am not an expert at. But it will be available sometime very soon, maybe in a few days. Okay, looks like everything else is relatively addressed. Does anyone have any questions that were not mentioned in the chat, or they want to be able to spit out now? Is everything straightforward? Great. Okay, so again, the point of the OctoberFest is to peruse and master, and I use the term master very loosely, the LibreVerse. One of the issues that we have, one of the pains or banes to be specific, that we have to address is that in order to have something with a lot of power, you got to recognize that power is correlated with complexity. Flexibility is associated with complexity, and that has been an issue for us because we want to be able to make something that is useful for multiple fields and multiple levels across the board. So that means there's a lot of details associated with that, which means that it's important in order to master or understand what you're supposed to master, and the things that you don't need to master, don't worry about the issues associated with that. So let's get this thing going here. Okay. Actually, I'm continuing the conversation here. This is the Jupyter Notebook system. So it's one of the interfaces or one of the components of the LibreVerse, like I mentioned before. This right here is actually embedded into my quantum mechanics classes when I teach them. I haven't taught them for a couple of years, but it gives me the ability of embedding Python code and interacting with what's called particle in the box approach, where mastering of not just code, which is important for teaching STEM students, but mastering being able to make a widget up and come up with different calculations here are exceedingly important in order to internalize the gist of the topic. The nice thing about this is it's using a conventional Python code, which means that there's a range of different technologies. Let me phrase it. There's a range of different products that other people have created that we're able to use effectively. For example, several years ago, this individual on Twitter, Free Radical, whom I don't know who he is, it generated this nice little distillation diagram that I was then able to use and pop into my general chemistry for honors class that was effective for mastering distillation, which is kind of a tricky issue in order to be able to get to if you remember being taught it or actually are familiar with it. That can extend, again, capitalizing on the caring and sharing model for OER from other people's codes that's out there, which I'm very excited about. The bot server, The bot server is mostly viewed from the back end, from our side, but we're going to be expanding a little bit of that to the conductor, probably sometime in late winter, which gives people the ability in order to run simple bots over their books in order to do global changes. Some of them are relatively easy in order to do. They're empowered by what's called regular expressions. If you're familiar with regular expressions, you understand that it can be a very difficult thing in order to master, if anyone can truly master regular X or regex. But this will be available for people to do this global curation efforts, which is exceedingly important for how we curate our content as a curatatory. Accessibility. We could talk a long time about accessibility. We're not going to. We have a legal and ethical requirement in order to ensure that the students in our classes are learning and using the material that we give them effectively without issues associated with specific disabilities that they may have. For compliance with online, that's the Web Content Accessibility Guideline, or guidelines, because it's a series of rules, WCAG, and we follow 2.1. 2.2 just came out, and I'm still trying to figure out exactly what that has. And that right there is important in order to address across the board. That means that instructors need to be able to ensure that the content that they're creating handles WCAG, and typically the average instructor does not have that sort of experience. So we built bots in order to be able to help facilitate converting content to WCAG compliance. And we also built a real-time checker, which I'll be showing to you momentarily. The key point is that anything that's generated, whether it's text, organization, videos, homework, interactive elements, and anything else, has to satisfy WCAG rules, or have an alternative in order to be able to address that. And we take that exceedingly seriously. So one example of that is on the editor of our libraries. There's an option in order to be able to run content on the page that you're editing in order to be able to evaluate whether the accessibility, actually it's the top 10 biggest issues of accessibility, are handled. We're going to be expanding that into many more features in the upcoming years, but it's a way in order to address accessibility at the core, at the point in which you're constructing, rather than doing it afterwards, although we have the tools in order to do it afterwards just as effectively. So, and that's again part of the bot infrastructure that's out there. Commons Conductor, we'll be going through it in more details soon enough. It's a very peculiar name. The term commons is the front end, and the conductor is the back end. The front end is a cataloging system, which gives you access of looking at the collections. I should emphasize that we have numerous pages that are not in collections, that are sort of part of the general wiki-based approach that's sort of sometimes in learning objects, but sometimes distributed in other sources. In fact, that's part of that's a major component of our traffic, is the content that was created, oftentimes using students or external faculty that have built content on our pages. You can also access not just the books, but you can access the libraries that we have here, those 18 independent libraries. You can access collections of books, oftentimes connected to specific partners that we have. You can also find homework. You can find projects that are under development. So if you're building a project and you want to find out if someone else is doing a similar project, you can do a search in order to find that, assuming that they made it public. There are two flavors of the commons. There's the LibreCommons, which I should remove. That's our single instance. That's what you use to register. That's the one that's sort of owned by us. And then we have all the other commons, which are owned by campuses. So when campus joins the LibreNet, they get their own branded instance, which showcases their books to their respective stakeholders, whether they happen to be faculty, students, administrators, alumni, and such, in order to be able to effectively find those things. but you can always use, you can actually do a search on any of the commons for any of the books if you want. And I can show you some of the commons of it. The back end is a bit more complicated. It's a project management tool. In fact, it's the only OER project management tool that I know of out there. It's open source. We tried a variety of different alternatives, like the Kanban-based things like Trello and other things, and we couldn't find something that worked for our needs. So we just decided to create this. Everyone in the community anyone in the community can register for an account. And you did so when you registered for this this workshop, because we built into it an event planner, which is what you guys used in order to register here. It gives you a handful of other things that are particularly useful off of it. It has an alert settings, which lets you come in and put an alert for a specific keyword. So if OER get brought into our infrastructure that address those keywords, you'll get notified. So if you're a math instructor or a calculus instructor and you want to know if any other calculus material comes into our infrastructure, our network, whether someone's creating a project or whether it's a new book or it's a new homework, you'll get notified of that. An exceedingly powerful approach in order to stay up afloat onto our infrastructure. And since our infrastructure is the largest infrastructure out there of OER content, it then makes it easier for people to update their content. This is also how you submit harvest requests. We also keep track of adoption reports in this way here, which is convenient for instructors that may want to know if their book has been adopted by other faculty or other departments. It facilitates peer review, which is important component associated with building OER. It will facilitate communication, whether that's communication within a team or it's communication across teams or across campuses, and that includes campuses that are within the LibreNet that have their own campus commons. This is a snapshot, which you probably already looked at, again, because you needed to register on our centralized commons. You've seen this, the front end. This is a branded campus commons for Prince George Community College, which is one of our LibreNet members, and actually was part of a grant that we had 5 years ago from the U.S. Department of Education, which just showcases the individual individual books that they have available. This is the back end, which should look familiar to you. And this right here is a specific project that I'll be focusing on in a moment that shows how you can organize these things. I'm going to skip over this because we're going to be doing it real time. Forums. We have the set of forums here. I should take the slide out here because I'm trying to transition this into the conductor so that the forums for communication around communities of practice or even from curation boards that we have are centralized into the same platform that's used for building of content, which is the most effective way in order to be able to do that instead of having a separate technology. We do have a chat room that's in a Discord channel that's at chat.libretext.org. But that is not used as much these days. It used to be very active a couple of years ago. And many of the student developers on our project actually hook into here. So if you have questions and you want real-time feedback, this is one mechanism in order to be able to get that. Okay. Project Solo, we rebranded. So I should have updated this slide deck here into Project Nova, or just Nova. And it is a sort of a mini LibreVerse or mini learning management system that's designed in order to operate as a course infrastructure, just like how Canvas is, but it's much simpler than Canvas, and it provides a mechanism in order to centralize courses, not just books, so you can actually organize courses and use it as a LMS. This again was meant in order to complement those Raspberry Pi boxes for developing countries, but there are also many K-12 campuses out there in America that don't have enough money to pay for Canvas or other LMSs, but want to be able to capitalize on the infrastructure that we have provided, and this is a mechanism for doing that. I'm not going to be discussing this or showing this anytime in the next couple of days because it's still not fully in production, but you do have access to it when you look at the interface, which I'll show to it momentarily. I'm going to skip over the infrastructure of the LibreNet. And I just want to end with the Adapt homework system, which is going to be a lot of conversation tomorrow. We built a homework system thanks largely to the state of California investment funds, although some of it also came from the U.S. Department of Education. And it was a slow, painful process. We wanted to be able to develop an infrastructure that's flexible, dynamic, comprehensive, integratable, LMS agnostic, powerful, and free or nearly free. These were the criteria that we had for our homework system. And the intent off of building this thing is that if we want to be able to take the place of commercial publishers, you need to be able to provide all the resources that commercial publishers provide. And that means not just that means not just textbooks, but it also means homework. So homework for commercial publishers are like a golden set of handcuffs. They lock faculty in, and it makes it difficult in order to extricate faculty in order to adopt OER until this is actually addressed. We knew that. We knew we needed to address this. We tried this for many years, even since the first start was in 2009, 1 year after we started, when we started playing around with homework system, and we had lots of failed attempts for it. Many of them had to do with mission mismatch with partners that were looking at using our infrastructure in order to monetize things, because they looked at our traffic and they can see a lot of dollar signs, and that turned out that those partnerships collapsed. Fortunately, state of California came on board, helped us out in order to be able to address that, and we built Adapt for you to be able to capitalize on it. But it's a very slow process, but I feel it's been a very efficient process. We're very happy with Adapt. The state of California just gave us $4 million about a half a year ago in order to massively expand the scope of Adapt beyond just general chemistry, but to basically 4 major categories of STEM fields, but it's used in many non-STEM humanities-based courses because we have a comprehensive perspective on things. The key aspect behind Adapt is not to reinvent or recreate the wheel, and is to capitalize on existing technology as much as we can, and then augment that as necessary for generating our final product. Adapt is available at adapt.libretext.org. Again, we're going to go over it. Right now, it has about 190,000 questions, so it's a massive question bank. And so even if instructors don't want to adopt Adapt's technology as a homework platform, it provides opportunity for faculty to have access to 190,000 questions as a question bank. And I don't know any faculty member that does not want to have access to more free questions. And I should say preserved questions, in that they're not, most of them are not in Chegg or Coursera or that, and then algorithmic, and you can play with it and expand it over there. The Adapt homework, so just to lay out some of the issues associated with the usage of Adapt homework, especially from a sustainability perspective, it's free to the students and faculty of the state of California. So that's the deal that we made with the state of California in their $5 million investment, because it includes 2 grants out here. All verified instructors in the world can have access to it as a question bank, flat out. We provide that. That's part of our mission. But in order to use it as a homework system, that requires a little bit of buy-in. And what that buy-in eventually comes into, when people ask it, besides saying it's super cheap, it's somewhere in the order of between $10 to $15 per student per term, comprehensive, as many classes as they want, and no more than $30 per year, period. And there are a few details off of it, not very many. If people want to know more details about that, we can address it. The intent here is that we want to be able to operate in a sustainable manner, because we have servers, we have IT, we have programmers, we have custom support, all the infrastructure that you need to have in place here, which is not minor. We handle on our side, and we need a mechanism in order to be able to support that. So even if the content is open, or open license that people can access, verified instructors specifically can access, the homework infrastructure is there. So I don't want to go into this detail really, because I'll be discussing it in more detail tomorrow, But we use technologies like WebWork, which is a math-based technology from the University of Rochester, has expanded greatly outside of the University of Rochester. iMathAS is the technology underlying MyOpenMath. So anyone who has a course, an existing course in WebWork or MyOpenMath can be imported into Adapt and have a bit more features than what you have in those native technologies. We also have an H5P repository, that's the studio, which you guys have access to. I shared the access code on the conductor page for this workshop. And it provides a mechanism in order to build and distribute H5P in a centralized fashion, not in a fragmented fashion. And then Adapt can utilize QTI, which is question and test interoperability. That is the technology that underlies most LMSs and their question bank infrastructure. The one exception to that is Moodle, and they have something called Gift, which I know little about, to be honest. So if you have an existing question bank in Canvas, for example, or other LMSs, with the exception of Moodle, we can take it and dump it into Adapt. And we've done that greatly. So it's centralized. You can standardize it in the sense that you can add appropriate metadata and do the searches off of it in a more coherent manner than trying to parse through various commons infrastructure in order to find questions. This is what it looks like. This is my personal account for my chemistry classes. I've been using it for the last 3.5 years, and I will be using it probably until I retire. I'm going to skip over these because I will be discussing them tomorrow. The only thing I want to mention here is that Adapt is called Adapt because it has basic adaptive learning capabilities. So if you're unfamiliar with that, adaptive learning, at least in its general form, is the ability in order to customize the learning experience for individual students. And customize can be greatly customized, or it can be a little bit. The key point is that different students may have different experiences with the interface in order to better suit their needs, and more specifically, better suit filling in the gaps that they may have in their educational experience. So Adapt is called Adapt because it has that. So instead of just giving an infrastructure that's traditional, where you have courses and you have assignments and you have questions, you then have the ability, in order to have, instead of a single question, have a decision tree. We call it a learning tree. And the approach is that you have a single root question up here. If a student fails to get it wrong, they go into a series of remediation nodes that are meant in order to handle gaps, to act as a virtual tutor of sorts in order to be able to address the constituent skills necessary in order to master that root question that's up there. This is not a black box algorithm-based approach. This is a white box, choose your own adventure approach, you can say. And I like this much more than a black box, because black boxes generate fragile students. They are spoon-fed what they're supposed to be learning. They don't have agency in their activity, and hence they don't have a strong engagement with what's going on. This provides a mechanism for facilitating metacognition. So students will dictate what skills they want to be able to explore based on their understanding about what skills that they feel they've mastered. And it also couples into self-efficacy, which is another internal recognition of these sort of things. We're very excited about that. There's lots of evidence that this is a superior approach than here. It just takes a little bit of time in order to build these trees. We have about 200 trees constructed in general chemistry right now, but we're going to be building 500 trees per year in our current grant, and we strongly encourage other people to build trees so that everyone can capitalize on that community. Again, we'll go into that in more detail tomorrow. This is a snapshot of the studio. I encourage you to take a look at that. Again, at studio.libretext.org, using your access code that's available on your thing. Okay, so the last comment here before we actually transition here is dealing with learning analytics. So we wanted to build an infrastructure that is able to provide us detailed information about how students are interacting with the resources we give them. And there are reasons why we want to go about doing that. The two primary reasons for that is efficacy testing and pedagogy evaluation. You want to be able to evaluate how students are using the material in order to be able to find out if you need to alter that material in order to better suit the learning criteria that you have in the class, or to just basically evaluate if students are behaving in the way that you expect them to when you actually give them assignments and such. So this is an example of a study that we published in 2015, where I taught 2 back-to-back classes of 500 students each. I will never do anything like that again. But this right here consists of one of those quarters. This is a follow-up summer quarter, different cohort, can't really compare these things. But this is looking at daily page views. And what we see here is you know exactly when the exams are because you know exactly when students start cramming. That's not surprising. We all know students cram, but this gave me a number in order to evaluate how many students cram. And because I was able to track via this IRB-based study how which students were the ones that cram, I were able to identify the performance or that you got, the hit that students had when they were cramming. I should be more specific, that students that crammed did. It may be their cramming or maybe their personality. The two may be correlated, but nonetheless, the key point is that the students that tended to cram tended to have about 10 to 12% hit on their performance versus students that didn't cram. What I don't have are long-term effects. What's its impact on the next year or in the next term that's out there, which I have an interest in order to be able to evaluate. So based off of the desire in order to remove cramming, I use these analytics in order to be able to make weekly quizzes as a way in order to see if that's a mechanism in order to reduce cramming, which it does. So the offset, the difference between right before the exam and right after the exam, or not right after, but not right next to the exam, their studying habits are only a factor of 2 versus a factor of 20 or so that's out here. So from that perspective, it's success. This is still very basic analytics that we introduced here in 2015. We have been building an analytics dashboard for faculty and students in order to collect these data. But we're updating it. I'm not entirely happy with the way it's set up right now. It's also meant in order to be able to provide an early warning system for instructors to identify students that are not studying in the ways that we want them to study, or studying all or other criteria necessary in order to be successful in their classroom. And no doubt we're going to be expanding analytics as things evolve off of here. We're very excited about this, and this is available for you. I will also mention efficacy. So 99.9% of books, whether they're OER or otherwise, don't have efficacy evaluated. So at this point, we have to ask, what exactly does efficacy mean here? And we're basically arguing that the resource that's generated demonstrates learning in the students. That doesn't mean that OER doesn't have learning off it. It just means that it doesn't demonstrate it and it doesn't ensure that it's maximized off of that. So if you have to be able to evaluate that, in order to evaluate that, you need data, and that's what the analytics infrastructure is, to provide data that the resources that are generated truly are able to handle what we want to be able to do, handle it. And that's good, not just because we want to be able to generate good OER, it's good we want to be able to report to various agencies that what we're doing in the classroom is truly effective. This is what our current analytics dashboard looks like. The one I showed before was just basically looking at the data itself. This right here is looking at my general chemistry book from last year, showing the readings per day across all books. And this right here is looking at the reading per day of a specific page. So maybe we'll get information about how students are reading, how they're moving ahead, and being able to use that in order to guide, again, whether it's efficacy or pedagogy evaluation. I will mention this quickly, and then we'll take a break or answer any specific questions off of here. This is not a surprising concept. A lot of people in the world don't speak English. A lot of people in the world don't speak English as their primary language. A lot more speak it as their secondary language, and there is a need for OER in non-English languages. So we're sitting on the largest repository of OER content out there. It was a shame for us not to be able to pursue a translation infrastructure in order to be able to convert that stuff into different languages. And we did that. We pursued that a little bit with Spanish. We had students, we had faculty come in order to update a handful of books. It was a long, slow, painful process in order to be able to make these things. However, technology moved ahead on us since we started that, especially in the last few years, based off of AI and machine learning and other approaches, and gave us the ability in order to convert or implement using right now Amazon's machine translation infrastructure. We can convert a book into a new book in a new language using machine translation. We can do that within 20 to 30 minutes, I think, by just pressing a button, and it will generate the book. We did that in Spanish for 100 or 1,000 books. I can't remember how many it was. It was a really large number of books, and it was meant as a test. And what happened was that there was such a strong need for Spanish OER that it started growing uncontrollably. So right now, the Spanish library that we have, which is a translation of all the mostly machine translation of all the other libraries, is our second biggest library in terms of traffic. And I wouldn't doubt that at some point it will start to become our most important library in terms of traffic. We did the same thing in Ukrainian. And we did it in a handful of other languages, and we're looking into being able to do something like this in Hebrew right now as a follow-up that's off of here. We're very excited about being able to take OER and distributing it to other countries. I mentioned that a few times in terms of building the Project Nova or building the Raspberry Pi box. I believe that OER should be distributed as broadly as we can. So I will end with what I started here, which is our mission. We're implementing a community-built platform for the construction, curation, adoption, and adaption of OER that's comprehensive and can be curated at multiple levels. No one in the community has anywhere close to the sort of scope that we have out there. The closest thing that may be there would be Lumen Learning, and they're a for-profit enterprise, which have a very different philosophy in terms of how they want to use OER specifically to make a profit off of our students, which we do not. With that, I will end with the statement I said: students are not a market to exploit or make a profit off of. And I'll end this longish overview, but I want to be able to lay the groundwork in terms of understanding the various components of the LibreVerse that we're going to be getting into.